Hello from Inside Drug Discovery. This video gives a brief description of a drug that was recently approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. That drug is Revuforj. Revuforj was approved on November 15, 2024. Revuforj is approved for the treatment of relapsed or refractory acute leukemia arising from translocations in the KMT2A gene. The active compound in Revuforj is revumenib. The drug is administered orally, twice per day, in a 270 milligram dose for most adult patients. The applicant for Revuforj's NDA is Syndax Pharmaceuticals. The prescribing information insert of Revuforj is cited at the bottom of the slide, and most of the information in this video is pulled from this reference. KMT2A translocation involves rearrangements of the KMT2A gene. While KMT2A translocation is not responsible for most acute leukemias in adults, KMT2A translocations are very prevalent in acute leukemias in infants. Acute leukemia cases arising from KMT2A translocations are prone to recurrence after treatment, as well as poor response to initial treatment, hence the relapsed or refractory language in the approved indication of Revuforj. The target for revumenib is menin. Menin is a protein that binds various other proteins, including those expressed from KMT2A. Revumenib acts as a menin inhibitor by preventing these protein-protein interactions, PPIs. Blocking PPIs has traditionally been a very challenging mechanism of action, so the discovery and development of revumenib is an impressive feat. Selected physicochemical properties of revumenib are shown on this slide. These properties are not part of the prescribing information, but they are interesting to review from a medicinal chemistry lens. Although the molecular weight is high and the number of rotatable bonds is at the recommended limit, revumenib does fall within molecular space that can be reasonably expected to be orally absorbed. The properties on this slide are for revumenib as a neutral structure. Revuforj, however, is formulated with revumenib as its citrate hydrate, which likely improves solubility. Here we have some of the key pharmacokinetic parameters for revumenib. These are for a 276 milligram dose, which I will detail more on a later slide. Based on its mechanism of action as a menin inhibitor, the therapeutic benefit likely requires a continuous minimum effective concentration of the drug. Given revumenib's somewhat short half-life, its twice-per-day dosing is likely necessary to maintain continuous exposure in the patient. The exact oral bioavailability is not reported. The unbound fraction is 0.1, so it is 90% bound to plasma proteins. Finally, renal excretion of unchanged drug is only 7%. Let's talk more about metabolism and excretion. Revumenib is metabolized primarily by cytochrome P450-3A4, with only one metabolite of mention, metabolite M1. The structure of M1 is not disclosed in the prescribing information, and I could not find it online. If I had to guess, because CYP3A4 often oxidizes tertiary amines, I would expect M1 involves a transformation around this nitrogen. M1 is not active as a menin inhibitor, but it does contribute to adverse reactions in patients. In terms of excretion, revumenib and its metabolites are excreted both in the feces, likely by biliary excretion, and the urine. A consequence of revumenib's metabolism by CYP3A4 is that the drug's dosage must be adjusted if a patient is taking a strong CYP3A4 inhibitor. CYP3A4 inhibitors specifically mentioned in the prescribing information are listed at the bottom of the slide. Because of the role of CYP3A4 metabolism and the potential toxicity of both the parent drug and metabolite M1, dosing adjustments based on both patient mass and the presence of potential CYP3A4 inhibitors are fully outlined in the prescribing information. The official dosage for adults is either 270 milligrams, obtained with a 110 and 160 milligram tablet, or 160 milligrams, just a 160 milligram tablet. In Section 12, the clinical pharmacology section, dosages of 113, 276, and 339 milligrams are mentioned. These values imply that at some point during clinical trials, the expected dose involved 113 and 163 milligram tablets. This change in dosing during development has no bearing on the approval of Revuforj, but the documentation does provide insight into the dynamic nature of determining an ideal dose during clinical trials. As an oncology drug, it is no surprise that Revuforj carries a number of warnings and adverse reactions. First, Revuforj increases risks of developing differentiation syndrome, for which Revuforj carries a boxed warning on its labeling. Differentiation syndrome, which can be very severe and potentially fatal, has been observed to arise from use of other acute leukemia drugs as well. Other possible adverse reactions are listed here, and these adverse reactions were observed in at least 20% of patients taking Revuforj. Irregularities in laboratory blood tests, such as elevated liver enzymes, are also possible. Most drugs do not carry this many adverse reactions, but then again, not all drugs treat a condition as serious as cancer. Life-saving and life-extending drugs often have greater safety risks. That is the end of this summary of the approval of the new drug application of Revuforj, which was granted by the U.S. FDA on November 15th of 2024. Revuforj is a menin inhibitor for the treatment of relapsed or refractory acute leukemia associated with KMT2A translocations. Thank you for watching this video. Please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, making a comment, or leaving a question. Take care.